The biggest mistakes are often made by people who think they already know the whole story. The city was only beginning to wake as the first streaks of sunlight reflected off rows of office windows, painting the streets of downtown Baltimore with a quiet golden glow that made everything seem ordinary. Commuters gathered beneath the weathered bus shelter on East Fayette Street, clutching coffee cups, scrolling through their phones, or staring silently toward the horizon as they waited for the next route to arrive. Among them stood Monica Hayes, a black woman in her early 40s wearing a navy blazer over a simple cream blouse, comfortable slacks, and practical walking shoes. Nothing about her appearance demanded attention. She carried a worn leather tote, checked the time on a modest wristwatch, and quietly reviewed a folder tucked beneath her arm before slipping it back into her bag. To everyone around her, she looked like another professional heading into another workday. That illusion would not survive the next few minutes. Across the street, Officer Ethan Brooks watched from his patrol SUV as traffic rolled steadily through the intersection. He had spent nearly 12 years wearing a badge, and somewhere along the way confidence had slowly transformed into certainty, the kind that convinced him his instincts were almost never wrong. When his eye settled on Monica, he noticed only what fit the story he had already begun writing inside his own mind. A woman standing alone. An older leather bag. Calm eyes that never seemed nervous enough for someone being questioned. Instead of seeing patience, he saw suspicion. Instead of seeing composure, he imagined concealment. Without another thought, he stepped out of the cruiser and crossed the street with measured confidence. Conversations around the bus stop faded as people noticed the uniform approaching. A teenager removed one earbud. An elderly man folded his newspaper. A mother gently pulled her young son closer without understanding why. Monica looked up as the officer stopped a few feet away. "Morning," she said politely, expecting nothing more than a routine greeting. Instead, Officer Brooks asked for identification in a tone that suggested the outcome had already been decided. Monica remained calm, speaking with the quiet confidence of someone accustomed to respecting the law. She asked if there was a specific reason for the request. The officer's expression hardened. Every measured answer she gave seemed, in his mind, to confirm the suspicion he could not explain. Around them, phones slowly began appearing above folded arms as curious witnesses sensed an uncomfortable moment unfolding. Monica glanced briefly toward the approaching city bus, now only a block away, before returning her attention to the officer. She neither argued nor raised her voice. She simply stood where she was, maintaining the same steady posture she had carried since arriving at the stop. That calm unsettled Ethan more than anger ever could. The arriving bus slowed as passengers inside looked through the windows toward the growing crowd. Drivers passing the intersection turned their heads for only a second before continuing on. Somewhere nearby, a traffic camera silently recorded every movement. High above the street, unnoticed by anyone standing below, another security camera captured the same scene from a different angle. No one waiting beneath that bus shelter realized they were witnessing the first moments of an event that would soon dominate headlines across the country. And no one, especially Officer Ethan Brooks, had the slightest idea that the quiet woman standing in front of him was only minutes away from changing his career forever. Officer Ethan Brooks kept his gaze fixed on Monica Hayes as the city bus came to a gentle stop only a few feet away. The doors folded open with a familiar hiss, and several passengers stepped off while others waited to board, but the ordinary rhythm of the morning had already been interrupted. Monica reached calmly into her tote bag, moving slowly enough for everyone around her to see exactly what she was doing. She removed a leather wallet and held it at her side without making any sudden movement. Her expression remained composed, the kind of quiet confidence that usually settled tense situations instead of escalating them. Officer Brooks asked again for identification, this time with a sharper tone that caused nearby conversations to fade completely. Monica looked directly at him and answered respectfully that she was willing to cooperate but would like to understand why she had been singled out in the first place. It was a simple question, delivered without anger, yet it seemed to frustrate him even more. To Brooks, hesitation looked like resistance, and calmness felt almost defiant. The people gathered beneath the shelter exchanged uncertain glances. A construction worker carrying a bright orange lunchbox shifted his weight and quietly began recording with his phone. A college student lowered her backpack onto the sidewalk and watched without saying a word. An elderly woman waiting for the same route tightened her grip on the handle of her cane, her eyes moving back and forth between the officer and the woman standing before him. Even the bus driver remained seated behind the wheel, sensing that leaving now would mean driving away from something important. Monica slowly handed over her identification, never breaking eye contact. Brooks studied it only briefly before asking additional questions that seemed less interested in facts than confirming an assumption he had already accepted. Monica answered each one with measured patience. She spoke clearly, never raising her voice, never showing irritation, and never attempting to embarrass the officer in front of the growing audience. Somewhere inside her bag, a cell phone vibrated once, then again a few moments later. She did not reach for it. Another vibration followed almost immediately. Unknown to everyone standing there, those unanswered calls were coming from people expecting her arrival at a federal meeting that had been scheduled weeks in advance. Several blocks away, assistants were beginning to notice the unusual silence. Meeting rooms were filling. Coffee cups rested beside neatly organized folders. A digital clock mounted on the conference room wall continued counting the minutes while one reserved chair remained empty. Back at the bus stop, Brooks asked Monica to remain where she was while he contacted dispatch. His voice carried enough confidence to suggest he expected confirmation rather than clarification. Monica nodded politely and folded her hands in front of her, standing exactly where he instructed. The morning breeze carried fallen leaves across the sidewalk as traffic continued flowing through the intersection almost as if nothing unusual were happening. Above them, the traffic camera silently documented every passing second. Across the street, the window of a small neighborhood bakery reflected the entire scene like a mirror. Inside that reflection, more phones appeared in the hands of silent witnesses. Nobody knew exactly why they felt compelled to keep recording. They only sensed that something about this ordinary Tuesday morning did not fit. And while Officer Brooks believed he was taking control of the situation, invisible pieces of a much larger story were already moving into place, quietly, patiently, and completely beyond his awareness. The minutes stretched on with a quiet weight that no one at the bus stop could fully explain. Officer Ethan Brooks listened to the short responses coming through his radio, each one failing to produce the certainty he expected. Monica Hayes remained exactly where she had been instructed to stand, her posture relaxed, her breathing steady, her attention drifting briefly toward the bus that had now pulled away without her. Missing that ride did not seem to concern her nearly as much as the growing misunderstanding unfolding in front of dozens of strangers. Another vibration echoed from inside her tote bag, followed by another only seconds later. She recognized the pattern immediately. Her office never called repeatedly unless something required immediate attention. Even so, she made no attempt to answer. Respect for lawful procedure had guided her entire career, and she refused to abandon that principle simply because she had become the subject of unexpected scrutiny. Several miles away, inside the United States Attorney's office, the atmosphere was changing by the minute. Staff members gathered around a polished conference table covered with briefing folders prepared for a multi-agency meeting involving federal investigators, senior prosecutors, and local law enforcement leadership. A large digital display showed the meeting agenda, but one item remained impossible to begin. The lead presenter had not arrived. Monica Hayes was known throughout the office for being early, organized, and remarkably dependable. She had never missed a scheduled briefing without notice. Her executive assistant, Rachel Collins, glanced at the clock before trying Monica's phone again. Straight to voicemail. Rachel frowned, then opened the calendar one more time to verify the morning schedule. Nothing had changed. Monica should have walked through the front doors nearly 15 minutes earlier. Across the room, Deputy United States Attorney Daniel Mercer noticed Rachel's growing concern. He quietly asked whether Monica had called ahead. Rachel slowly shook her head. That single answer changed the mood inside the room. Monica was not simply another attorney. Over nearly 2 decades, she had earned a reputation for careful judgment, professionalism, and unwavering respect for the Constitution. Judges trusted her preparation. Investigators respected her fairness. Even defense attorneys who disagreed with her arguments often acknowledged her integrity. She believed justice depended as much on restraint as it did on authority, a lesson she had learned from her father, a retired public school principal who often reminded her that character revealed itself most clearly when nobody was watching. Those words had remained with her since childhood. Back at the bus stop, the growing circle of onlookers continued watching in near silence. Some whispered among themselves, wondering what could have caused such an extended encounter. Others simply observed Monica's remarkable composure. The construction worker who had started recording earlier continued holding his phone steady, while the college student quietly uploaded a short video clip to social media with a caption asking whether anyone knew what was happening downtown. Within minutes, comments began appearing from complete strangers, each offering different assumptions but very few facts. Above the intersection, cameras continued recording without emotion or opinion. Every conversation, every movement, every passing minute quietly became part of an objective timeline that could not be rewritten later. Neither Monica nor Officer Brooks realized that evidence was accumulating from every direction. One believed patience would eventually reveal the truth. The other believed certainty required no further questions. Before the morning ended, only one of those beliefs would survive. Officer Ethan Brooks lowered his radio and looked back at Monica Hayes with the same confidence that had carried him through countless routine encounters. The uncertainty in the dispatch responses did not change his mind. Instead, it convinced him that he needed to take greater control of the situation before, as he believed, it became more complicated. Monica noticed the subtle shift in his expression. His questions became shorter. His patience became thinner. Yet she answered each one with the same steady voice that had never once risen above a normal conversation. She explained that she was on her way to an important meeting downtown and politely asked whether she was free to leave if no violation had been identified. Brooks did not answer the question directly. Instead, he instructed her to remain where she was while he completed additional checks. Around them, the morning crowd continued to grow. Another city bus arrived, paused briefly, then departed after several passengers chose to remain outside simply to watch what happened next. Office workers slowed their pace as they crossed the intersection. A delivery driver parked nearby and leaned against his truck, quietly observing from across the street. The atmosphere had changed completely. It no longer felt like an ordinary weekday commute. It felt like the entire block was holding its breath. Monica glanced once toward the federal courthouse visible several blocks away between the buildings before returning her attention to the officer. Inside her bag, her phone vibrated again. Then again. She knew Rachel would be worried by now. Daniel Mercer would almost certainly be asking questions. The conference room would be waiting. Even so, Monica refused to interrupt the encounter by reaching for her phone without permission. She believed that respect shown during difficult moments revealed more about a person than confidence displayed during easy ones. Brooks interpreted her silence differently. To him, every calm answer sounded rehearsed. Every patient pause seemed calculated. He believed experience had taught him to trust instinct above appearances, never realizing that instinct without evidence could become its own kind of blindfold. Across town, Rachel Collins finally stopped calling Monica's phone and began calling hospitals, hoping there had simply been an unexpected medical emergency. Each answer brought more uncertainty. Daniel Mercer quietly stepped into the hallway and contacted the office of the United States Marshal's Service, asking whether anyone had heard from Monica that morning. Within minutes, several people who normally remained focused on completely separate responsibilities were now asking the same question. Where was Monica Hayes? Back at the bus stop, the college student who had uploaded the short video watched in surprise as the view count climbed into the thousands. Comments poured in from people recognizing the intersection, debating what they believed they were seeing. Some defended the officer without hesitation. Others questioned why a woman standing peacefully at a bus stop had been delayed for so long. Nobody watching online knew the full story. Neither did the witnesses standing only a few feet away. High above them, the traffic signal changed from red to green, then back again, as the city continued moving forward without noticing that one ordinary sidewalk was quietly becoming the center of an event that would soon force an entire department to answer uncomfortable questions. Monica remained composed. Officer Brooks remained convinced he was making the correct decision, and with every passing minute the distance between appearance and reality grew wider than either of them could possibly imagine. Nearly 40 minutes had passed since Monica Hayes first stepped beneath the bus shelter, yet the morning still refused to return to normal. The sidewalk had become unusually quiet, not because people had left, but because they had chosen to stay. Curiosity had replaced impatience. Every passing minute seemed to convince more witnesses that they were watching something far more significant than a routine police encounter. Officer Ethan Brooks stepped aside once again to speak with dispatch, requesting additional database checks after the initial responses failed to satisfy him. The answers coming back remained incomplete. Monica's identification was valid. There were no warrants. No criminal alerts. No missing person reports. No outstanding investigations connected to her name. The information should have ended the encounter, yet Brooks continued searching for a reason that justified the time already invested. Admitting uncertainty now felt more difficult than continuing forward. Monica remained exactly where she had been instructed to stand. She folded her hands loosely in front of her and quietly watched traffic move through the intersection. Inside her tote bag, the steady rhythm of incoming calls finally stopped. A few seconds later, new message notifications appeared one after another. She knew without looking that Rachel Collins would never stop trying to reach her without good reason. She also knew Daniel Mercer would already be reorganizing the federal meeting around her unexplained absence. For the first time that morning, Monica allowed herself one brief thought. The people waiting for her were not simply waiting for another attorney. They were waiting for decisions affecting investigations that had taken months to prepare. Even so, she chose silence over interruption. Across the city, concern was spreading beyond the conference room. Rachel had already contacted courthouse security to ask whether Monica had entered through another entrance. No record existed. Daniel Mercer requested that the Information Technology Department attempt to locate the last confirmed activity on Monica's government calendar. Another assistant quietly contacted the driver's office responsible for official transportation assignments, only to learn that Monica had intentionally declined a government vehicle because she preferred taking public transit whenever possible. She often said that public service should remain connected to the public itself. That small personal habit had always reflected humility. This morning it had unexpectedly placed her at the center of an event no one had anticipated. Meanwhile, the short video uploaded from the bus stop had begun spreading far beyond Baltimore. Local journalists noticed it first. Then legal commentators. Then former prosecutors who questioned why an apparently cooperative commuter had been delayed for such an extended period without any obvious explanation. None of them knew Monica's identity. They simply recognized that something about the encounter deserved closer attention. On a nearby office building, a privately owned security camera overlooked the entire sidewalk from a higher angle than the traffic cameras below. Across the street, the bakery manager quietly saved footage from the storefront camera after noticing several customers discussing the unusual scene outside. Inside a parked delivery truck, a dashboard camera continued recording with a precise digital timestamp. Piece by piece, an independent record of the morning was being preserved without anyone coordinating it. Officer Brooks remained focused on proving his original judgment correct. Monica remained focused on respecting the process she had devoted her career to defending. Neither of them realized that while one story appeared to be unfolding in front of the witnesses, another, much larger story was already assembling itself through unanswered calls, silent cameras, patient observers, and a trail of evidence that would soon become impossible for anyone to ignore. The first sign that the morning was about to change came without sirens or raised voices. It arrived as a black government sport utility vehicle turned slowly onto East Fayette Street, followed by a second and then a third. Their movements were calm, deliberate, and almost unnoticed at first because the city traffic continued flowing around them. Only when the vehicle stopped a short distance from the bus shelter did the growing crowd begin exchanging uncertain looks. Officer Ethan Brooks glanced briefly toward the convoy before returning his attention to Monica Hayes. He assumed they had nothing to do with the situation unfolding in front of him. Monica, however, recognized the vehicles immediately. She did not smile. She did not wave. She simply lowered her eyes for a brief moment, knowing that the misunderstanding she had hoped would quietly resolve itself had now become impossible to contain. The doors opened almost in unison. Several professionally dressed men and women stepped onto the sidewalk with measured confidence. Their expressions carried urgency but not panic. One of them, a senior official wearing a dark blue suit, scanned the crowd only once before his eyes settled on Monica. Without hesitation, he walked directly toward her. The conversations beneath the bus shelter stopped completely. Even the passing traffic seemed quieter. The official came to a respectful stop a few feet away and spoke in a calm voice that carried farther than anyone expected. "Good morning, Councillor Hayes. We have been trying to reach you for nearly an hour. Is everything all right?" For the first time that morning, Officer Brooks looked genuinely uncertain. He glanced from Monica to the newcomers and back again, waiting for someone to explain what he was missing. Monica answered with the same composed voice she had maintained since sunrise. "I have been cooperating with the officers' questions and have not had an opportunity to return my calls." The official nodded once before turning politely toward Brooks. He introduced himself as Daniel Mercer, Deputy United States Attorney, and presented his federal identification. Standing beside him were officials from the United States Attorney's Office and representatives assigned to coordinate the federal meeting that Monica had been scheduled to lead that morning. Brooks accepted the identification, reading it twice as though repetition might somehow change the words printed on the credentials. Around them, dozens of silent witnesses watched the realization slowly settle across his face. The woman who had stood patiently at the bus stop for nearly an hour was not simply another commuter. She was the senior federal prosecutor responsible for overseeing major public corruption cases across the district. The phones that had quietly recorded the encounter captured every second of the moment. No dramatic announcement followed. No celebration. No argument. Only silence. Monica finally reached into her tote bag after receiving a brief nod from Daniel Mercer. She removed the phone that had been vibrating all morning. The screen displayed dozens of missed calls and messages from colleagues, federal agencies, and courthouse staff. She looked at them only briefly before placing the phone back inside her bag. Her attention returned to Officer Brooks, whose confidence had given way to visible reflection. Monica did not criticize him. She did not raise her voice. Instead, she simply said, "Every person deserves to be treated with fairness before conclusions are reached." Those words settled over the intersection more heavily than any accusation could have. The witnesses who had arrived expecting to see an ordinary police stop now understood they had watched something entirely different. The cameras were still recording. The unanswered questions were only beginning. And although the truth had finally stepped into the open, the consequences of that morning had only just begun to unfold. By early afternoon, the encounter at the bus stop had transformed from a local incident into the highest priority review inside the Baltimore Police Department. What had seemed like an ordinary stop now existed from nearly every possible angle. Traffic cameras preserved the timeline second by second. Storefront security systems captured the sidewalk from across the street. Dashboard cameras recorded passing vehicles. Cell phone videos documented conversations from different perspectives. Even the city bus had interior and exterior recordings that confirmed exactly when passengers boarded, waited, and watched. Instead of relying on memory, investigators suddenly possessed a complete digital record. Inside police headquarters, command staff gathered in a conference room where multiple video screens displayed synchronized footage from the morning. Nobody needed to speculate about what had happened because every decision could now be examined frame by frame. Supervisors compared dispatch recordings with body camera footage, radio traffic, witness statements, and official reports. Small details that had seemed insignificant only hours earlier now carried enormous importance. Every minute of delay was measured. Every question was reviewed. Every response was compared against department policy. Officer Ethan Brooks sat quietly in another room as internal affairs investigators began asking him to explain the reasoning behind each decision. He answered honestly, insisting that he believed he was acting responsibly based on his observations at the time. Yet as the recordings played back, even he could see moments he had barely noticed while standing at the bus stop. Monica Hayes had remained calm throughout the encounter. She had answered questions respectfully. She had not attempted to leave after being instructed to stay. She had never raised her voice. The evidence showed patience where suspicion had once seemed obvious. Across the city, the short videos recorded by witnesses had already spread across national news broadcasts and social media platforms. Legal analysts discussed the importance of objective evidence instead of assumptions. Former law enforcement leaders reminded viewers that professionalism depended upon facts, not conclusions reached too quickly. Civil rights organizations called for transparency rather than outrage, encouraging the public to wait for the complete investigation before forming final opinions. Monica herself declined every request for an immediate interview. Instead, she returned to the United States Attorney's Office after finally attending the delayed federal meeting. Colleagues expected anger or frustration, yet they found neither. Monica simply resumed her responsibilities, insisting that the focus remain on improving public trust instead of turning one difficult morning into a personal battle. Her quiet response surprised many people who had expected dramatic public statements. Daniel Mercer later explained to reporters that accountability worked best when guided by evidence, procedure, and respect for the law. Those words quickly became part of the national conversation. Back inside headquarters, investigators continued assembling the complete timeline until there were no unexplained gaps remaining. Every camera supported the others. Every witness statement fit within the recorded sequence. The picture became clearer with every passing hour. This was no longer about one officer and one commuter standing at a bus stop. It had become a lesson in how quickly assumptions could influence decisions and how powerful objective evidence could be in revealing the full truth. As evening settled over the city skyline, one conclusion had already become impossible to ignore. The cameras had never rushed to judgment. They had simply recorded the truth, patiently waiting for everyone else to catch up. The investigation continued for several weeks, but the direction of its findings became clear long before the final reports were completed. Independent reviewers, city attorneys, police supervisors, and legal experts examined every available recording alongside departmental policies and witness testimony. The objective was not to embarrass any individual or create headlines. The objective was to determine whether established procedures had been followed and whether the rights of an ordinary citizen had been fully respected throughout the encounter. The conclusion reached by multiple reviewing authorities pointed towards serious procedural concerns that required corrective action. The city of Baltimore entered discussions with Monica Hayes and her legal representatives, not because she demanded revenge, but because the incident had created measurable professional disruption, unnecessary public embarrassment, and significant questions about departmental decision-making. Throughout those discussions, Monica remained remarkably consistent. She repeatedly stated that financial compensation alone would never restore public confidence. What mattered most to her was ensuring that the same sequence of events would be far less likely to happen to someone else who lacked her professional background, legal knowledge, or public visibility. During one closed meeting with city officials, Monica explained that many people never receive the opportunity to have multiple cameras recording their experiences or colleagues searching for them within minutes. Many simply return home carrying frustration that no report ever captures. Those words lingered in the room long after the meeting ended because everyone present understood the truth behind them. Negotiations eventually produced a civil settlement totaling $4.7 million, accompanied by commitments to expand officer training, strengthen documentation requirements, improve supervisory review of prolonged investigatory stops, and increase the use of objective evidence during internal evaluations. Public reaction focused on the settlement amount, but Monica redirected every interview toward the reforms instead. She reminded reporters that numbers attracted attention while lasting improvements protected communities. Officer Ethan Brooks remained under administrative review as department leadership evaluated policy compliance and appropriate personnel decisions through established procedures. his future would be determined by that formal process rather than by public opinion. Legal analysts across the country describe the case as a reminder that accountability worked best when evidence, transparency, and due process guided every conclusion. Law schools discussed the incident during ethics seminars. Police academies added portions of the publicly available recordings to classroom conversations about perception, communication, and professional judgment. Civil rights organizations and law enforcement associations, often separated by sharp disagreements, found uncommon agreement on one principle. Decisions affecting another person's freedom deserved patience, careful observation, and facts that could withstand objective review. Several months later, Monica quietly returned to the same bus stop before sunrise on her way to another meeting. The shelter looked exactly as it had that morning. Commuters checked their phones. Buses arrived on schedule. Traffic moved through the intersection without hesitation. Nothing about the location suggested it had become nationally recognized. Monica stood in the same place for a moment, smiled politely as another passenger greeted her, and stepped onto the arriving bus. Without seeking attention from anyone around her. The cameras that had once captured uncertainty now recorded something much simpler. An ordinary citizen beginning another ordinary workday. Yet the city itself was no longer quite the same, because one morning had proven that the strongest foundation of justice is never built upon assumptions. It is built upon fairness, evidence, accountability, and the quiet courage to let the truth speak before anyone else does. Months later, the story was no longer remembered because of headlines, courtroom filings, or the settlement itself. It endured because it forced people to ask a question that reached far beyond one city, one department, or one difficult morning. How often do we decide who someone is before giving them the chance to speak? That question quietly found its way into classrooms, community meetings, police academies, and legal conferences across the country. Monica Hayes never attempted to become the face of a movement. She simply returned to the work she had dedicated her life to long before anyone recognized her name. Every morning she walked through the doors of the United States Attorney's office carrying the same worn leather tote she had carried to the bus stop that day. Colleagues noticed that she had not changed. She still greeted security officers by name. She still thanked administrative staff for their work. She still believed respect should never depend upon a person's title, appearance, or position. Her quiet consistency became more powerful than any public speech could have been. Officer Ethan Brooks also faced a different future than the one he had imagined. The investigation, the training, and the public scrutiny forced him to confront uncomfortable questions about judgment, perception, and responsibility. Those lessons could not erase what had happened, but they became reminders that authority carries its greatest weight in ordinary moments, when no cameras seem to matter and every decision rests upon personal character. Across Baltimore, new training sessions encouraged officers to slow down, gather facts carefully, communicate clearly, and remember that professionalism begins long before an official report is written. Community meetings that had once been filled with frustration gradually became conversations about rebuilding trust through transparency and accountability. Progress did not happen overnight, but meaningful change rarely does. It begins with one decision, followed by another, repeated consistently until a different culture takes shape. The bus shelter on East Fayette Street remained exactly where it had always been. Thousands of people passed through it every week without realizing they were standing in a place that had quietly become a symbol of something much larger than a single encounter. Parents waited beside their children. Students hurried towards school. Nurses finished overnight shifts. Construction workers carried lunch boxes. Lawyers reviewed documents before another busy day. Every person arrived carrying a different story, a different purpose, and a different life that could never be understood from a single glance. Perhaps that was the greatest lesson of all. Justice is not measured by how quickly authority reaches a conclusion. It is measured by the willingness to search for truth before reaching one. A uniform deserves respect, but so does every citizen it serves. A title deserves recognition, but human dignity should never require credentials. On that ordinary morning, one woman chose patience when frustration would have been easier. The truth did not arrive with anger. It arrived quietly, supported by evidence, protected by integrity, and strengthened by the simple decision to let facts speak louder than assumptions. Long after the cameras stopped recording and the news crews packed away their equipment, that truth continued echoing through every life the story touched. Because the strongest form of justice is not the power to judge another person. It is the wisdom to see their humanity before making that judgment.